This 6-year-old homeless girl finds a millionaire tied to a tree, but after she sets him free, unfortunately, he does something terrible. Watch until the end to find out. Comment on what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The sun hadn't yet risen when Lily, just 6 years old, woke up to the sound of her mother, June's, cough. In the small shack behind the recycling depot on the outskirts of Harmony Creek, Oklahoma, the little girl already knew her routine. She needed to go out and collect cans before the heat of the day became unbearable. Her dark, watchful eyes observed her mother sleeping, her face contorted in pain, even in her sleep. At 39, June was battling an illness that was slowly stealing her movements, making each day of work as a cleaner harder than the last. Lily slipped on her worn-out sneakers and grabbed the burlap sack she used to carry the recyclables. The harsh winter made her small fingers ache, but she knew she had to help. Her mother's medicine was too expensive for a cleaner who could barely work anymore. Before leaving, she covered June with the only blanket they had, a gift from Mrs. Davis, the neighbor who sometimes brought a plate of leftovers when she had extra from lunch. The dirt roads were still deserted when the girl began her walk towards the town's artificial lake, Lake Serenity. She had discovered that there, near the dense woods surrounding the water, she always found cans left behind by fishermen. As she walked, she thought about the 4th of July festival that would take place on the weekend, another one she wouldn't be able to attend. The other kids made fun of her old clothes and the way her mother walked now, dragging her right leg slightly. The sky began to brighten when Lily reached the edge of the lake. The mist still covered part of the water, giving the landscape a ghostly air. It was then that she heard something different, a low groan, almost imperceptible, coming from the woods. Her first instinct was to run, as June always warned, but there was something in that sound that made her stop. It sounded like pain. The same kind of sound her mother made when she thought she was asleep. Following the noise, Lily ventured into the trees, her small feet treading carefully on the dry leaves. The sound became clearer as she advanced, until she saw it. Tied to a large oak tree was an older gentleman with graying hair, his expensive clothes now dirty and torn, his face marked by bruises and scratches. Theodore Ted Caldwell, the wealthiest man in the region and owner of the largest supermarket chain in the state, was there, completely vulnerable. But Lily didn't recognize him. To her, he was just someone needing help, like her mother. So often needed, and no one appeared to help. "Are you hurt, mister?" she asked, her childlike voice breaking the silence of the woods. Ted opened his eyes with difficulty. He had been there for more than a day, abandoned by business rivals who had kidnapped him during a morning walk on his property. Thirst and pain consumed him, and for a moment he thought he was delirious when he saw that thin little girl with worn clothes and a burlap sack on her back. "Water, please," he whispered, his throat so dry he could barely speak. Without hesitation, Lily took out of the sack her reused plastic bottle, still half full. She approached carefully and brought the water to the man's cracked lips. As he drank in small sips, she watched the sisal ropes that held him. They were thick and tied tightly, marking the skin of his wrists and ankles. "I'm going to help you," she said with a surprising determination for someone so young. She searched around until she found a stone with a sharp point. It would be a long job, but Lily was used to not giving up. She had learned that from June, who even on the most difficult days never gave in. The next few hours were of meticulous work. The sun was already high when she managed to cut the first rope. Her small hands ached, but she continued. She offered Ted the stale bread she had saved for her own lunch, breaking it into small pieces so he could chew it slowly. "Why are you helping me?" he asked, his voice a little stronger after the water and food. Because Mom always says we have. To help when someone needs it, Lily replied simply, focused on her work with the stone. She's sick, you know. Sometimes she can't even get out of bed. But even so, when Mrs. Davis needed help bathing her son who broke his leg, Mom went to help, even though she had to hold onto the walls to walk. Ted was silent, watching that child who, in her innocence and kindness, was possibly saving his life. Known for his coldness in business and his difficult temperament since losing his wife Cecilia 17 years ago, he felt something strange in his chest, a mixture of gratitude and shame that he hadn't experienced for a long time. The sun began to set when the last rope was cut. Ted tried to get up, but his legs buckled. Lily, not intimidated by his size, wrapped her thin arm around his waist, offering support. "My house isn't far," she said. "Mom will know what to do. She always knows." The walk to the shack was slow and painful. Ted, still weak and disoriented, leaned on Lily as his bare feet stumbled on the stones in the path. The businessman, accustomed to the luxury of his mansion and the respect imposed by fear, now found himself completely dependent on a child who couldn't weigh more than 40 pounds. The sun had already set when they finally arrived at the recycling depot. The smell of wet cardboard and rusty metal invaded Ted's nostrils, making him realize the harsh reality of the place where his little savior lived. Piles and more piles of recyclable material accumulated around what he could distinguish as an improvised construction in the back of the lot. "Mom! Mom!" Lily called, her childlike voice echoing among the mountains of cans and plastic bottles. June heard her daughter's call and tried to get up from the old mattress where she rested. Her legs, increasingly rebellious due to multiple sclerosis, took a long time to respond. When she finally managed to stand, leaning on the plywood walls of the shack, her heart froze when she saw her little Lily supporting a clearly injured man. "My God! What happened?" asked June, her maternal instinct speaking louder than the fear of strangers. Despite the difficulty in walking, she approached quickly, her dark eyes assessing the situation with the wisdom of someone who has learned to deal with life's adversities. "I found him tied up near the lake, Mum," explained Lily, still supporting part of Ted's weight. "He's hurt and thirsty." June, even with her limitations, acted with the haste of someone who is used to taking care of others. With movements calculated not to lose her balance, she helped her daughter lead the man to the only sofa they had, a worn-out piece of furniture they got when Mrs. Davis renovated her house. "Lily, get the clean water we saved for the week and the first aid kit that Mrs. Davis gave us," instructed June, studying Ted's injuries with concern. Her experienced eyes noted the wrists bruised by the ropes and the various scratches and bruises on his face and arms. While Lily ran to get the requested items, June managed to distinguish, even under the dirt and sweat, the features of someone she knew very well. Not personally, but from the newspaper pages and the conversations of the employers in the houses, where she worked as a cleaner. It was Theodore Ted Caldwell, the owner of Caldwell's supermarkets, known both for his wealth and for his difficult temperament. A moment of hesitation passed through her face, but was quickly replaced by the determination of someone who has learned that human dignity is above any social difference. With gentle hands, she began to clean his wounds as soon as Lily brought the materials. "Do you need me to call someone? Family? The police?" asked June, her voice showing a mixture of concern and respect. Ted, who until then had kept his eyes half closed, focused his gaze on June. There was something familiar about her, like a distant memory that he couldn't reach. "No," he replied in a hoarse voice. "No authorities, please. I just need some time to recover." While June took care of the injuries, Lily busied herself preparing coffee with the last spoonfuls of the powder they saved for special occasions. The smell of the drink filled the small space, bringing some comfort to that unusual situation. "You're sick," Ted stated, watching June's cautious movements, the way she needed to lean on the furniture to stay on her feet. "Multiple sclerosis," she replied without hesitation. "But I can still work as a cleaner when my body allows it. Lily helps me collecting recyclable material. It's not the life I dreamed of for her, but we're together, right, Mom?" completed Lily, bringing a cup of coffee to Ted. "And Mrs. Davis said that one day you'll get better, that you just need to get the right medicine." Ted held the cup with trembling hands, watching the interaction between mother and daughter. Something inside him, long dormant, began to stir. He remembered his own childhood in an orphanage before being adopted by the Caldwell family. The loneliness, the helplessness, the lack of a loving look like the one he saw between June and Lily. The next few hours passed in silence, punctuated only by the chirping of crickets and the distant noise of cars on the road. June improvised a bed on the floor with the few blankets they had, insisting that Ted take the mattress. Lily, exhausted after the long day, fell asleep, curled up, next to her mother. In the middle of the night, Ted woke up startled, the memories of the kidnapping still vivid in his mind. He observed the shack in the dim light of a lamp that hung from the ceiling, the plywood walls covered by magazine clippings trying to hide the cracks, an old calendar where June marked her days of work, Lily's worn notebooks stacked carefully in a corner, along with pencils stored in a chocolate powder can. It was then that his eyes landed on something that made his heart clench, an empty medicine bottle on the makeshift table next to the mattress where June slept. On the label, he recognized the name of a very expensive drug for the treatment of multiple sclerosis, the same one that his late wife Cecilia used in the initial stages of her disease. The businessman ran his hand through his gray hair, feeling an emotion that he hadn't experienced for a long time. There, in that simple shack, he had found more humanity than in all the business dinners and shareholder meetings of recent years. Lily had not only saved his life, she, without knowing it, was awakening something that he thought was dead since Cecilia's departure. When the first rays of sun began to enter through the cracks in the shack, Ted had already made a decision. It wouldn't just be a matter of gratitude or charity, it would be a form of redemption, a chance to do something truly meaningful with all the power and money he had accumulated over the years. The sound of June coughing brought him back to reality. He watched as she tried to get up, her legs failing several times before she could stand. Lily, waking up with the noise, immediately ran to help her mother, her small arms serving as support, with a naturalness that broke his heart. "I need to go to work," said June, more to herself than to others, as she tried to fix her hair in the small, cracked mirror on the wall. "Mrs. Carmichael is waiting for me to clean." "You're not going anywhere today?" Ted's voice sounded firm, but different from the authoritarian tone he usually used in his companies. "I need to talk to you two about the future." Lily and June exchanged worried glances. For years, they had learned that when rich people talked about the future, it was rarely something good for people like them. But there was something different. In Ted's eyes that morning, a glimmer of humanity that even he didn't know he still possessed. The silence that followed Ted's words was interrupted by the strident sound of a telephone. It was the businessman's latest generation cell phone, miraculously still working after everything that had happened, hidden in an inner pocket of his torn jacket. On the display, the name of his brother Arthur flashed insistently. "Ted, where the hell have you been? The police are turning the city upside down. The shareholders are in a panic, and you..." And Arthur's excited voice was cut off abruptly when Ted turned off the device, his eyes fixed on June, who was trying to disguise a new wave of pain while leaning on the wall. "First, I need to make a call," he said, his voice taking on a softer tone as he addressed Lily. "Little one, could you lend me that glass of water again?" While Lily ran to fulfill his request, Ted dialed a number he knew by heart. "Dr. Evans? Yes, it's me. I'm fine, but I need an urgent favor. That experimental treatment for multiple sclerosis we talked about last month. Yes, exactly. I want you to prepare everything for a new patient. No, it's not for me. I'll send a car to pick you up in an hour. June, who was listening to the conversation while trying to organize her few pots to make a breakfast with what was left of flour and eggs, felt her hands tremble, not from weakness, but from a fear she knew well, the fear of hope. How many times had she heard promises of help that turned into disappointment? "Mrs. June," Ted began, putting the phone aside, "I know you must be wondering why a stranger your daughter found tied up in the woods is making calls about medical treatments in your house. But I need you to listen to me, please." At this moment, Lily returned with the glass of water and sat on the floor next to her mother, her big eyes alternating between the two adults with the curiosity typical of her age. Ted drank a sip of water and continued, 17 years ago, I lost my wife Cecilia to a rare disease. In the last months of her life, she always said that our biggest mistake was letting money harden our hearts. I didn't listen at the time. I plunged into work. I turned Caldwell's supermarkets into an empire, but I lost something in the process. My humanity. He paused, observing the magazine clippings that June had pasted on the walls of the shack, trying to bring some color to that precarious environment. Among them was a photo of a church, and below, written in childish handwriting, probably by Lily, "One day we will live in a nice house, Mum. Yesterday, when those men abandoned me in the woods to teach me a lesson for not giving in to their business proposals, I thought it was my end. But then your daughter appeared, a child who had nothing to give but a piece of stale bread and water in a reused bottle, but who offered everything without asking anything in return." June hugged Lily, who smiled proudly, without really understanding the weight of the businessman's words. Outside the shack, the movement of the recycling depot began, with the noise of the first collectors arriving for another day of work. What I'm trying to say is that I want to help you, not out of charity or to clear my conscience, but because your daughter taught me something that 17 years of wealth couldn't, the value of true kindness. At this moment, they were interrupted by loud knocks on the shack door. It was Arthur, accompanied by 2 security guards. His normally controlled face was red with anger, and his eyes scanned the environment with obvious contempt. "So, this is where you were hiding? In a dump like this? Ted, have you completely lost your mind? The police are..." He stopped when he saw his brother's condition, the injuries still visible. "It wasn't a choice, Arthur," Ted replied, with a calmness that surprised everyone. "I was kidnapped. This girl found me and saved me. Her mother took care of me during the night." Arthur narrowed his eyes, studying June and Lily as if they were some kind of threat. "And I imagine they are now expecting a hefty reward, aren't they? How much have you already promised them, Ted? I need to remind you that any significant financial decision needs to go through the board, and..." "They didn't ask for anything," Ted interrupted him, his voice taking on a tone that left no room for argument. "And what I do with my personal money is none of your business, brother." June, feeling the tension in the air, tried to get up to intervene, but her legs failed. Lily ran to support her, and for the first time Arthur seemed to notice the woman's state of health. "Mom, don't force it," whispered Lily, helping June to sit down again. "Remember what the doctor at the clinic said." It was at this moment that a new figure appeared at the door. Dr. Evans, one of the most renowned neurologists in the country, specializing in degenerative diseases. His experienced eyes immediately assessed June's situation. "Mr. Caldwell, we need to act fast," said the doctor, already approaching June with his briefcase. "From what I can observe, we are facing a case of multiple sclerosis in an intermediate stage. but there is still time to reverse part of the condition with the appropriate treatment. Arthur took a step forward, his voice taking on a warning. "Antone, Ted, think carefully about what you're doing. These people, they always want more. It starts with medical treatment and ends with you being manipulated and extorted. Haven't you learned anything from that gardener story 20 years ago?" A heavy silence fell over the shack. June, who was being examined by Dr. Evans, started at the mention of the gardener, but remained silent, her face a mask of concern. "Enough, Arthur." Ted's voice sounded firmer than anyone there had ever heard. "Lily and June are moving today to one of the furnished apartments we keep for visiting executives. Near the central office, Dr. Evans will start the treatment immediately, and I will designate a team to adapt the apartment to June's needs." "But Mr. Caldwell," June tried to protest, but was gently interrupted. "Mrs. June, please, let me do this, not as payment, because there is no money in the world that pays for what your daughter did for me, but as a way to start over. To remember who I was before I became just the owner of Caldwell's supermarkets." Lily, who had remained quiet throughout the discussion, suddenly asked with her childlike innocence, "Are we going to be able to take the clippings from the wall and my school notebooks?" Ted knelt down with difficulty in front of her, ignoring Arthur's disapproving expression. "We'll take everything you want, little one. And more importantly, I'm going to enroll you in the best school in town, where no one will make fun of your clothes or your mother." Lily's eyes filled with tears of joy, and she hugged Ted spontaneously, taking everyone by surprise. The businessman, known for his coldness, felt something break inside him, as if the last piece of ice that enveloped his heart finally melted. Arthur slammed the door on his way out, muttering something about emergency meetings with the shareholders. The security guards followed him, leaving behind a silence charged with possibilities. Dr. Evans continued his examination on June, making notes and already planning the treatment protocol. Outside, the sun was already high, and the noise of the recycling depot seemed distant, as if that little shack had been transformed into a world apart, where miracles were still possible. The move to the apartment happened that same afternoon. While some Caldwell's supermarket's employees, sent urgently by Ted, helped to carry June and Lily's few belongings, the little girl ran from one side to the other, making sure that none of her treasures were forgotten, especially her school notebooks and the magazine clippings that decorated the walls of the shack. Mrs. Davis appeared to say goodbye, her eyes tearful, alternating between joy and concern. "Are you sure everything's going to be okay, June?" she asked in a low voice, while watching the employees carry the old mattress. "That man, he's known for being tough in business. They say that after his wife passed away, he became a bitter person." June, sitting in a wheelchair provided by Dr. Evans to facilitate her locomotion during treatment, squeezed her friend's hand. "I'm also scared, Mrs. Davis, but did you see how he looks at Lily? It's not the look of someone wanting to do harm. It's like she woke something up inside him." In the apartment, located on the 10th floor of a modern building in the city center, the reality of the change in their lives began to materialize. The space, originally decorated for executives visiting for business, was being quickly adapted to June's needs. Support bars were installed in the bathroom, the height of the bed was adjusted, and a team of physical therapists had already been contacted to start home sessions. Lily was amazed by every detail. The view of the city from the large window, the shower that worked perfectly, the kitchen with new appliances. But what really left her speechless was her own room, where a bookcase had already been installed for her books and notebooks. "Mom, look! There's even a desk for me to do my homework," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "And the closet is bigger than our entire shack." Ted, who was watching the scene leaning on the doorframe, felt a pang in his chest. It was the same excitement he saw in Cecilia's eyes when she discovered something new, before the disease began to consume her. Without realizing it, he took his hand to the pocket where he kept his old wedding ring. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Margaret, a middle-aged lady with a maternal expression who Ted had hired to help June with household chores and accompany her during treatment. "Dinner is served," she announced with a gentle smile. "I made that soup that Dr. Evans recommended, Mrs. June." During dinner, served at the dining table overlooking the illuminated city, Lily didn't stop asking questions about everything, from the names of the buildings she saw through the window to details about the school where she would start studying the following week. June, although still visibly uncomfortable with the whole situation, couldn't help but smile at the sight of her daughter's happiness. "Dr. Evans will come early tomorrow to start your treatment," explained Ted, watching how June struggled to hold the cutlery firmly. "And in the afternoon, if you feel up to it, I would like to discuss a job proposal." "Job?" June asked, surprised. "But in my condition—" "Trust me," Ted replied with a discreet smile. "I have something in mind that will fit your conditions perfectly." After dinner, when Margaret was helping Lily with her first bath in the bathtub, "Mom, there's even bubble bath." June found Ted on the balcony, his gaze lost in the lights of the city. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked finally, her voice carrying the weight of years of distrust learned in the harshness of life. "I know Lily helped you, but this is much more than anyone would do out of gratitude." Ted was silent for a long moment before answering. "Did you know that I spent my childhood in an orphanage? The Caldwells adopted me when I was 12 years old. I never knew what it was like to have someone truly caring about me until I met Cecilia in college. She also had multiple sclerosis." June felt her heart clench. Now she understood better the look of pain she sometimes saw in his eyes. "When she got sick, I had enough money to try any treatment in the world. But it wasn't enough. In recent months, she always said that I was losing something more important than money, my ability to connect with people, to feel compassion." He paused, his voice slightly choking. "Yesterday, when your daughter found me in the woods, she didn't see the businessman Theodore Caldwell. She just saw someone needing help. And she helped, even having so little to offer." The moment was interrupted by the sound of Ted's cell phone. It was Arthur again. He looked at the display and hung up without answering. "Your brother isn't happy with this situation, is he?" June observed. "Arthur, he's always been the numbers man. For him, everything comes down to profits and losses. But for the first time in a long time, I don't care what he thinks." Ted turned to face her. "Tomorrow he will call an emergency meeting of the board. He will try to convince them that I'm having a nervous breakdown, that I need to be removed from the presidency." "And you're not worried?" "No," he replied, with a serenity that surprised himself. "Because for the first time in 17 years, I know exactly what I'm doing." From the room came the sound of Lily's laughter, mixed with Margaret's affectionate voice telling a bedtime story. June felt tears in her eyes. How long had it been since she had heard her daughter laugh like that, carefree as a child should be? "There's something I need to tell you," she said, gathering courage, "about the past." But before she could continue, they were interrupted by Lily, who came running to show her new pajamas, a gift that Margaret had set aside for her. "Mum, look! It has unicorns!" Ted watched as June admired the pajamas with her daughter, making all the appropriate comments about the unicorn prints. There was something familiar in that scene, something he couldn't completely identify, like an old memory trying to emerge. Later, when everyone had retired, Ted remained in the apartment's living room, looking out the window at the city that practically belonged to him. His eyes fell on a photo of Cecilia that he always carried in his wallet. Her smiling in a garden, before the disease. "You were right, my love," he whispered to the photograph. "I had lost something important, but I think a little collector just helped me find it." In the next room, Lily slept, hugging her school notebook, dreaming of her first day in the new class. June, in her own adapted room, looked at the ceiling, a whirlwind of emotions in her chest. There was so much she needed to tell, so many secrets kept for years. But that night, she allowed herself only to feel gratitude for the natural kindness of her daughter, which had touched the heart of a man who everyone said no longer had one. At the entrance of the building, Arthur watched the illuminated windows of the apartment, his cell phone in his hands, dialing a number he hadn't used for a long time. "I need you to investigate some people," he said in a low voice. "A certain June and her daughter Lily. I want to know everything about them, especially about this woman's past. My brother may be blind, but I won't let two opportunists destroy everything our family has built." The first week in the apartment brought changes that June had never imagined possible. The treatment with Dr. Evans began intensively. 3 hours daily of medications and physical therapy, which, although exhausting, were already showing subtle results. For the first time in years, she was able to hold a cup without constant tremors. Lily, in turn, was about to start her first day at St. Clair's School, one of the most prestigious schools in the city. On the morning of the grand premiere, she ran around the apartment in her new uniform, the pink backpack, a gift from Ted, almost bigger than herself. "Mum, will the other kids like me?" she asked, while Margaret braided her hair with ribbons that matched the uniform. "At the other school, they—" "Don't think about that, my love," June interrupted, managing to get out of the wheelchair with a little more firmness. "You are smart and have a huge heart. Whoever doesn't like you is missing out on a wonderful friend." Ted, who had arrived early to accompany Lily's first day, watched the scene with a discreet smile. Dressed in his usual impeccable suit, he looked like another person compared to the man Lily had found tied up in the woods a week ago. "I have a surprise for you, little one," he said, taking something out of his pocket. It was a wooden case with Lily's name engraved. Inside, a collection of colored pencils and pens that made the girl's eyes shine. "For your art classes." The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Arthur, who entered the apartment without announcing himself, carrying a thick folder under his arm. His cold gaze swept the room, lingering on Lily in her new uniform. "We need to talk, Ted," he said, his voice sharp. "Now." "I'm busy, Arthur. I'm taking Lily to her first day of school." "That's exactly what we need to talk about," Arthur insisted, throwing the folder onto the dining table. Photographs and documents scattered, and June felt her heart freeze as she recognized some of them. "Not in front of the girl," Ted ordered, his voice leaving no room for discussion. He turned to Lily with a smile. "Let's go, little one. We don't want to be late." As Ted took Lily to school in his executive car, Arthur remained in the apartment, his eyes fixed on June like a predator studying its prey. Margaret, sensing the tension, discreetly retreated to the kitchen. "You worked at the Caldwell Mansion 20 years ago, didn't you?" Arthur began, his voice laden with accusation. "As a gardener." June felt her legs weaken, grateful to be sitting in the wheelchair. "Yes," she replied simply, "and you were fired for theft, accused by Cecilia herself, my brother's wife." "I never stole anything," June replied, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "Mrs. Caldwell." She was confused at the time. The illness was already starting. "Spare me the excuses," Arthur cut in, spreading more documents on our table. "I have your criminal record here, petty thefts in your adolescence. And even more interesting, records from the hospital where Lily was born. You know what caught my attention? The dates." June closed her eyes, feeling the weight of a secret kept for so long. "Please." "Lily was born exactly 9 months after your dismissal from the mansion, and curiously, Ted was traveling during the entire period you worked there. He never knew of your existence until now. Arthur leaned over the table, his face inches from June's. So tell me, what's your real plan? Using the girl to get money? Or something bigger, like claiming part of the Caldwell inheritance? You're completely wrong, June replied, tears streaming down her face. It's nothing like what you're thinking. Then enlighten me. Arthur smiled humorlessly. Because from my point of view, we have a former employee with a criminal record who became mysteriously pregnant at the time she worked at the mansion, and now her daughter, coincidentally, saves my brother and leads him straight to you. Seems very well orchestrated. At this moment, the apartment door opened. Ted entered, his face transformed by fury at seeing June's condition. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "What did I do? I'm protecting our family, Ted. This woman is a con artist. She worked in our house 20 years ago. She was caught stealing by Cecilia." "Liar!" June shouted, finding the strength to get up from the wheelchair. "I never stole anything. Mrs. Caldwell, she thought I had taken her jewelry, but she had put it away somewhere else herself. The disease was already affecting her memory, but no one noticed yet." Ted staggered, old memories surfacing in his mind. He remembered Cecilia mentioning lost jewelry, how she got confused sometimes, but everyone attributed it to stress. "Why didn't you ever come to me to clarify this?" he asked, his voice softer. "You were traveling. When you came back, I had already been fired. And then I found out I was pregnant by my boyfriend at the time, who abandoned me as soon as he found out. I tried to look for a job in other places, but with the accusation of theft on my record," June sobbed, "I had to start from scratch in another neighborhood, cleaning houses, collecting recyclable material, anything to raise my daughter with dignity." Ted sat heavily on the sofa, decades of guilt and regret weighing on his shoulders. How many lives had he affected with his absence, with his obsession with work? "That doesn't change anything," Arthur intervened. "She's still a criminal from the past who—" "Enough!" Ted thundered, standing up. "Enough, Arthur! You are forbidden from approaching this family, and if you try anything against them, I will personally ensure that you never have any decision-making power at Caldwell's supermarkets again." "You've gone crazy. You can't—" "I can, and I will. Now get out." After Arthur left, slamming the door, a heavy silence fell over the apartment. Margaret reappeared from the kitchen, bringing a glass of water with a sedative for June. "Forgive me," Ted said finally, "for everything. For the injustice 20 years ago, for not being present to see that Cecilia was sick, for allowing an innocent person to be unjustly accused." "You had no way of knowing," June replied softly. "And look how God works in mysterious ways. My Lily, who was born in that difficult time, was the one who brought light back into our lives." Ted agreed, remembering Lily's smile on her first day of school. "Arthur won't give up easily," he warned. "He's always been obsessed with control, with maintaining the purity of the Caldwell name." "I'm scared," June admitted. "Not for myself, but for Lily. She's so happy with her new school, with her room, with everything." "I won't allow anything to happen to you," Ted promised, surprising himself with the fierceness of his determination. "But I need you to tell me everything, June. Every detail from that time. We need to be prepared for what Arthur might try." Meanwhile, at school, Lily was experiencing her own moment of tension. During recess, while drawing alone with her new pencils, a group of girls approached. "Hey, you're the girl that Uncle Ted brought, right?" asked one of them, who introduced herself as Brittany. "My dad works at his supermarket. Is it true that you used to live in a dump?" Lily felt her face burn, but she remembered her mother's words about dignity. "It wasn't a dump," she replied calmly. "It was a recycling center. My mom and I helped take care of the environment." To her surprise, instead of laughter, she saw genuine interest in Brittany's eyes. Cool! We're doing a project on recycling in science class. Can you help us? As Lily began to make new friends, sharing her knowledge about different types of recyclable materials on the other side of town, Arthur entered his private office, picking up the phone. "I need you to find out more," he said to the person on the other end of the line. "Dig deeper. I want to know every detail of this June's life in the last 20 years. Every job, every address, every person she had contact with. My brother may be blind, but I'm going to prove that this woman is a con artist, even if it's the last thing I do." 2 weeks had passed since the confrontation with Arthur. June's treatment progressed slowly, but with promising results. Dr. Evans was optimistic about her response to the new medication, although the side effects still left her exhausted at the end of each day. The physical therapy sessions, once a martyrdom of pain, were beginning to show small advances. She was already able to take a few steps, supported by the parallel bars. On a particularly tiring afternoon after physical therapy, June was resting on the balcony of the apartment when Margaret brought an unexpected visitor, Mrs. Davis, carrying a basket of homemade bread and a manila envelope. "My dear," Mrs. Davis hugged June warmly, her eyes tearful at seeing her friend without the wheelchair, sitting in a comfortable armchair. "I came as soon as I could. Things at the depot have been tense since you left." "How so tense?" June asked, accepting one of the still warm loaves that her friend offered. "A man has been showing up there asking questions about you and Lily. Kind of sneaky, you know, like a private detective." Mrs. Davis lowered her voice, looking around, as if she feared being heard. "And that's not all. I brought this for you." She handed the manila envelope to June, who opened it with trembling hands. Inside were old photos of the recycling depot, including several of Lily as a baby, crawling among piles of cardboard. Along with the photos, a typed note: "How much is the past worth to you?" "Arthur," June murmured, feeling a chill. "He's trying to gather evidence to discredit me." "There's more," Mrs. Davis continued, now truly worried. "Remember Mr. Jones, who coordinated the depot before he retired? He told me that he received a generous offer to testify that you were stealing material from the depot." June closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the old injustices accumulating again. At this moment, they heard the apartment door open. It was Lily coming back from school, accompanied by Ted. "Mrs. Davis!" The girl ran to hug her old neighbor, her impeccable school uniform contrasting with the memories of the worn clothes. "In the photos, in the envelope. Look what I did in art class." She proudly showed a colorful drawing, a representation of the 4th of July festival, with people dancing and smiling. In the center of the drawing, 3 figures holding hands. A dark-haired woman, a little girl, and a gray-haired man. "It's beautiful, my love." June forced a smile, quickly hiding the envelope between the cushions of the armchair. But she wasn't fast enough. Ted had noticed the movement. After Lily went to do her homework in her room, accompanied by Margaret, who promised to help her with math, Ted joined the women on the balcony. Without saying anything, he held out his hand to June, who reluctantly gave him the envelope. As he examined its contents, his face grew darker and darker. "I'll take care of this," he said finally, his voice controlled but filled with contained anger. "It's not that simple," Mrs. Davis intervened, her voice trembling slightly. "Your brother, he's messing with things from the past that can hurt a lot of people. It's not just June he wants to get to." "What do you mean?" Ted asked, sitting in the chair next to June. "Remember when I said I got pregnant by a boyfriend who abandoned me?" June began, her voice almost a whisper. "It wasn't exactly like that. I was engaged at the time to a guy named Robert, who worked as a driver for a wealthy family. When I found out about the pregnancy, he disappeared. I later learned that he had received a considerable sum to disappear and never contact me again." Ted felt his heart clench. "Arthur?" "No," June replied, silent tears streaming down her face. "It was Mrs. Caldwell." The silence that followed was deafening. Ted stood up, walking to the edge of the balcony, his hands gripping the railing tightly. "She wasn't well, Ted," June continued softly. "The disease was already affecting her judgment, but no one noticed. She thought, I was trying to get close to you, that the baby, that Lily could be your daughter. It was all a delusion of the disease, but at the time..." "That's why she accused you of theft," Ted completed, painful memories returning to the surface. "And I was too busy with expansions and acquisitions to realize that my own wife was losing her mind. Mrs. Caldwell called me to the garden that morning," June continued, her voice choked with emotion. "She said she had proof of the theft, that if I didn't disappear, she would make my life hell. I tried to explain about Robert, about the baby, but she wouldn't listen. She was convinced of a conspiracy that only existed in her sick mind." Mrs. Davis held her friend's hand, giving her strength to continue. "I left that same day without even taking my belongings. I found out later that Robert had received money to confirm the theft story, to say that he had seen me taking the jewelry, and then he disappeared with the money, leaving me alone and pregnant." Ted sat down again, his face in his hands. "And now Arthur has discovered all this." "Not everything," Mrs. Davis intervened. "He doesn't know about the letters yet." "What letters?" Ted asked, raising his head. "Mrs. Caldwell wrote to me months later," June explained, "when the disease was already more advanced. Letters asking for forgiveness, saying that she had found the jewelry, that she knew I was innocent, but I was so hurt, so focused on surviving and raising my daughter, that I never answered. I kept the letters all these years, hidden in an old can at the depot." "And Arthur is looking for those letters," Mrs. Davis completed. "He offered a reward to whoever finds any old document related to you, June." At this moment, they heard Lily's voice coming from the room. "Mom, come see, I learned a new song at school." June quickly wiped away her tears, forcing a smile. "I'm coming, my love." "I need to take care of this," Ted said, his voice firm. "I can't let Arthur destroy your life again, not after everything Lily did for me." "It's not just that, Ted." June held his hand, surprising both of them with the gesture. "Your wife, she deserves to have her memory preserved. These letters show that even sick, she tried to correct her mistake. Don't let Arthur use this to tarnish her." Ted nodded, feeling the warmth of June's hand in his. A warmth he hadn't felt for a long time, which made him remember simpler times, when money and power hadn't corrupted human relationships so much. "Help me get up," June asked softly. "Our daughter is waiting." It was only after she had already entered the apartment, supported by Mrs. Davis, that Ted realized what she had said. "Our daughter." The phrase echoed in his mind, awakening feelings that he thought were dead long ago. On the other side of town, in his private office, Arthur received another report from his investigator. "We found a clue about the letters, sir. A lady from the depot mentioned an old can stored for years." "Find those letters," Arthur ordered, his face contorted in an expression of triumph. "And then, let's show everyone who this family my brother is protecting really is." What Arthur didn't know was that at that very moment, Lily was showing Ted her homework, an essay about family that began with the words, "Family isn't just who has the same blood, it's who takes care of us with love." The next morning, the apartment was awakened by the sound of breaking glass. Ted, who had slept on the sofa in the living room after spending the night planning how to protect June and Lily, ran to the kitchen, only to find June fallen, shards of a water glass scattered around her. "I'm sorry," she murmured, trying to get up on her own. "I thought that I was stronger." "Don't move," Ted asked softly, approaching carefully so as not to step on the shards. "Margaret, can you come here, please?" While Margaret helped June up and cleaned the shards, Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas, her eyes wide with worry. "Mom? Are you hurt?" "No, honey. Just a moment of weakness." June tried to smile, but Ted noticed the paleness in her face. "You didn't take your medication last night, did you?" he asked, remembering that she had gone to bed right after the conversation with Mrs. Davis, too disturbed by the revelations of the past. June lowered her eyes, guilty. "I couldn't. I was too nervous." "I'm going to call Dr. Evans," Ted decided, already grabbing his cell phone. "We need to adjust this treatment." While they waited for the doctor, Margaret prepared breakfast, and Lily insisted on staying by her mother's side, holding her hand. The girl had grown a lot emotionally in recent weeks. She was no longer just the little can collector, but a child who was beginning to understand the complexities of adult life. "Mr. Caldwell," she called suddenly, her voice serious. "Why doesn't Uncle Arthur like us?" The silence that followed was heavy. Ted sat down at the table, thinking carefully about how to answer. "Sometimes, Lily, people have difficulty accepting changes. Arthur, he has always wanted to control everything since we were children, and now he is having difficulty accepting that I have changed, that I have found something more important than money and power." "What's more important?" she asked, her big eyes fixed on him. "Family," he replied simply. "Love. The things you taught me when you found me in those woods." At this moment, Dr. Evans arrived, interrupting the conversation. After examining June and checking her vital signs, his face took on a worried expression. "The treatment is working," he explained, "but the emotional stress is affecting her response. We need to consider some changes." "What kind of changes?" Ted asked, noting how June squeezed Lily's hand. "There's a new treatment protocol being developed at the Mayo Clinic," the doctor continued. "More intensive with more promising results, but, June prompted, "it would require her hospitalization for a few weeks for constant monitoring and medication adjustment." The silence that followed was broken by the sound of Ted's cell phone. It was Arthur again. He rejected the call. But seconds later, a message arrived. "We found the letters. Board meeting in an hour. Your presence is mandatory." Ted felt his blood run cold. He looked at June, who seemed paler than ever, and at Lily, who alternated her gaze between the adults, sensing the tension in the air. "Dr. Evans," he said finally, "prepare everything for the new treatment. I'm going to resolve some issues, and I'll be back to discuss the details." After the doctor left, Ted knelt down in front of Lily. "Honey, I need to go solve a problem at work. Can you take care of your mum for a few hours?" "Of course," she replied seriously. "I'll read her stories, like she used to do when I was sick." Ted smiled, running his hand through the girl's hair. Then, surprising everyone, including himself, he leaned down and gave June a soft kiss on the forehead. "Everything is going to be all right," he whispered. "Trust me." On the way to the Caldwell Supermarket's central office, Ted made 2 calls. The first was to his trusted lawyer, asking him to prepare some documents urgently. The second was to Mrs. Davis. "I need you to come stay with them," he asked, "and bring that old can from the depot. I know you know where it is." Mrs. Davis was silent for a moment. "How did you know?" "Because you are the only person June would trust to keep something so important," he replied simply. When he arrived at the office, the boardroom was packed. Arthur was standing, displaying an expression of triumph while holding a yellowed envelope. "Good that you decided to join us, brother," he said with false cordiality. "We have a lot to discuss about your mental capacity to continue leading this company." Ted entered the room calmly, noting the tense faces of the board members, men and women who for years had followed his decisions without question, now seeming ready to oust him. "Before we begin," Arthur continued, "I would like to share some interesting findings about your new protégés." He began to pull documents out of the envelope. First, we have June's criminal records, petty thefts in her adolescence. Then, we have witnesses from the recycling depot confirming that she frequently took materials without authorization. And the most interesting, he paused dramatically, letters written by our dear Cecilia, revealing a scandal that could destroy the reputation of the Caldwells. "You're bluffing," Ted said calmly. "The real letters aren't with you." Arthur frowned. "What?" At this moment, the door of the room opened. It was Ted's lawyer, carrying a thick folder and accompanied by a figure that made everyone hold their breath. Robert, June's ex-fiancé, visibly aged and haggard. "Gentlemen and ladies of the board," Ted began, his voice calm but firm. "Before you make any decision, I would like you to hear some truths, not about June or Lily, but about our own family." He gestured to Robert, who took a step forward, trembling slightly. "My name is Robert Silver, and 20 years ago I received money to lie about June, to confirm a false story of theft and disappear. The money came from Mrs. Cecilia Caldwell, who was in the early stages of a degenerative disease that affected her judgment." Arthur tried to interrupt, but Ted raised his hand, silencing him. "The real letters from Cecilia are here." He pulled an old envelope from inside his jacket. "Letters where my late wife, in a moment of lucidity, confessed her mistake and asked for forgiveness. Letters that show that, even sick, she had more dignity than many of us here." The lawyer began distributing authenticated copies of the letters to the board members. Ted continued, "While you read, I would like to present some more documents. First, my irrevocable decision to donate 30% of my shares to a foundation dedicated to the treatment of degenerative diseases. Second, the appointment of June as executive director of this foundation as soon as she recovers from her own treatment." "You can't do this!" Arthur exploded. "It's crazy!" "I can and I will," Ted replied calmly. "And there's more. I'm stepping down from the executive presidency of Caldwell Supermarkets." A murmur of surprise ran through the room. Arthur smiled triumphantly, but his smile died with his brother's next words: "To dedicate myself exclusively to the foundation and to my new family." "What family?" Arthur asked through gritted teeth. "The one your niece Lily helped me build," Ted replied, a gentle smile on his lips. "By the way, she won first place at the science fair yesterday with a project about recycling. I thought you'd like to know." The news of Theodore Caldwell's departure from the presidency of the supermarkets spread through the city like wildfire. While the local press speculated about the reasons, in the apartment where June and Lily lived, a difficult decision was being made. "I don't want to go to the Mayo Clinic," Lily declared, tears streaming down her face as she hugged her mother. "I don't want to be away from you." June, sitting in her special armchair, tried to control her own emotions as she explained for the third time. "It's just a few weeks, my love, for Mom to get completely better. But what about school and my new friends and Mr. Caldwell?" As if summoned by the girl's words, Ted entered the room, carrying a thick folder and a determined expression on his face. He had just returned from another tense meeting with the board, where Arthur had tried, unsuccessfully, to reverse his decisions. "I have a proposal for you two," he announced, sitting on the sofa next to June's armchair. "Actually, 3 proposals." Lily immediately approached, curious despite her tears. Ted continued, "First proposal, instead of staying separated during the treatment at the Mayo Clinic, how about we all go together?" "How so?" June asked, surprised. "I have an apartment in Rochester, Minnesota that I never use. It's 10 minutes from the clinic where your treatment will be. Lily can continue her studies at a partner school of St. Clair's. I've already checked everything, and I can coordinate the creation of the foundation from there." "But what about the supermarkets?" June questioned. Arthur always wanted operational control, Now he has it. I kept only my seat on the board and control of the shares that will go to the foundation." He paused, taking some papers out of the folder. Which leads me to the second proposal. Ted extended the documents to June. They were the statutes of the new Cecilia Caldwell Foundation, dedicated to the treatment and support of families affected by degenerative diseases. "I want you to be more than just the executive director. June, I want you to be my partner in this. You understand better than anyone what these families face. Your experience, your strength, it's exactly what we need to make a difference." June leafed through the documents with trembling hands, her eyes scanning terms like universal accessibility, integrated family support, and advanced research in treatments. "And the third proposal?" she asked softly, noting how Ted seemed suddenly nervous. He cleared his throat, adjusting his tie in a gesture that Lily had already learned to recognize as a sign of anxiety. This is more personal." At this moment they were interrupted by Margaret, who entered the room hastily. "Mrs. June, there's a young woman here wanting to talk to you. Says it's urgent." To everyone's surprise, it was Brittany, Lily's new friend from school, accompanied by her mother, Regina. The girl seemed agitated, holding a tablet in her hands. "Sorry to come without warning," Regina began, "but Brittany saw something on social media that we thought you needed to know." On the tablet, a video showed Arthur in an impromptu press conference in front of Caldwell's supermarkets. "And it is with regret that I announce that my brother is going through a delicate moment of mental health. The decision to donate a significant portion of our shares to a foundation managed by a former employee with a questionable history." "He can't do this," Lily protested, surprising everyone with her indignation. "Mr. Caldwell isn't sick. He's better than ever." Regina smiled gently at the girl. "That's exactly why we came. I'm a journalist. I work for the city's leading newspaper, and I have some information about your Uncle Arthur that he certainly wouldn't want to come to light." Ted raised an eyebrow, interested. "What kind of information?" "The kind that explains why he's so desperate to prevent the creation of this foundation," Regina replied, taking a folder out of her bag. 3 years ago, his wife, Christine, was diagnosed with the first signs of a degenerative disease. He had her admitted to a clinic in Switzerland and spread that she was on a spiritual retreat. The silence that followed was deafening. June was the first to break it. "He's ashamed. That's why he doesn't want the foundation. It would make public something he tries to hide." "Exactly," Regina confirmed. "And there's more. I discovered that he has been diverting money from the supermarkets to pay for her treatment in secret using shell companies." Ted closed his eyes. Decades of living with his brother being resignified in his mind. "Why didn't he ever tell me?" For the same reason you closed yourself off to the world after Cecilia passed away," June replied softly. "Sometimes it's easier to build walls than to admit our pain." Lily, who had been quiet absorbing the conversation, suddenly had an idea. "Mr. Caldwell, can't we help Aunt Christine too, at the foundation?" The simplicity of the suggestion hit everyone like a wave of clarity. Ted picked up his cell phone, dialing his brother's number for the first time in weeks. "Arthur, can we talk? Not about the supermarkets or the foundation, about Christine." The silence on the other end of the line was long, until Arthur's voice, normally so controlled, came out choked. "How did you—" "It doesn't matter. What matters is that we don't have to be enemies. The foundation, it can help Christine too. We can bring her back, give her the treatment she deserves, close to family." More silence, then a contained sob. "I don't know what to do anymore, Ted. The doctors in Switzerland, they say her case is complicated." "Then let's fight together," Ted replied, looking at June as he spoke. "As a family." That night, after everyone had left and Lily was already asleep, Ted finally managed to present his third proposal. On the roof of the building, under a starry sky that seemed to bless the moment, he took a small box out of his pocket. "I know it may seem hasty," he began, his voice softer than June had ever heard. "And if you think it is, I will understand completely. But these last months, you and Lily, you taught me more about love and family than I learned in my entire life." June felt her heart race as Ted knelt with difficulty in front of her, opening the small box to reveal a delicate ring. "It's not an expensive or ostentatious ring," he explained quickly. "Actually, it belonged to my biological mother, the only thing I have of her. I thought that maybe it could be a symbol of a new beginning for all of us." Before June could answer, they heard a small noise. Lily was standing in the doorway of the roof, still in her pajamas, her wide eyes fixed on the ring. "Ah, you gonna be my real dad?" she asked, her small voice laden with hope. Ted and June exchanged a look, decades of pain and loneliness dissolving in a moment of pure possibility. On the horizon, the city lights seemed to twinkle in approval, as a new family began to form, proving that sometimes the greatest miracles are born from the most unlikely moments. The move to Rochester, Minnesota, happened a week after the marriage proposal. Ted's apartment, although never used by him, was spacious and welcoming, located in an elegant building overlooking Central Park. Lily, impressed with the view from the 20th floor, spent hours drawing the different shades of the New York City sky. Adapting to the new city brought unexpected challenges. June, accustomed to the slower pace of the countryside, sometimes felt suffocated by the constant noise of cars and the rush of people. The treatment at the clinic, although promising, was strenuous. Daily sessions of intensive physical therapy, combined with a new cocktail of medications that often left her nauseous and weak. "I don't know if I can handle it," she confessed to Ted on a particularly difficult night after Lily had gone to sleep. "It's all so intense. The treatment, the city, the preparations for the foundation." Ted, who was organizing some documents on the table in the living room, dropped everything and sat down next to her on the sofa. "We can postpone the foundation if you want. Your health is more important." "It's not just that," June continued, her voice trembling slightly. It's the wedding too. What if I don't get better? What if I become dependent on you forever? I don't want to be a burden." "Look at me," Ted asked softly, holding her hands. "Remember the day Lily found me in the woods? I was literally tied up, completely dependent on a 6-year-old child. You know what I learned that day? That sometimes we need to accept help, that being strong doesn't mean doing everything alone." At this moment, they were interrupted by a noise at the door. It was Arthur, accompanied by a woman in a wheelchair that June recognized from the photos as Christine. Her face, although marked by the disease, maintained a serene beauty. "Sorry to come without warning," Arthur began, his voice stripped of its former arrogance. "Christine, she insisted on coming as soon as she heard about the treatment. Please, come in." Ted stood up, helping his brother maneuver Christine's wheelchair into the apartment. "June," Christine spoke, her voice soft but clear, "I wanted so much to meet you. Arthur told me about your treatment here, about the foundation. You are giving hope to so many families like ours." Before June could answer, they heard hurried footsteps coming from the hallway. Lily, who should have been asleep, appeared in her pajamas. "Uncle Arthur," she exclaimed, surprising everyone by running to hug him. "You must be Aunt Christine. I saw pictures of you on Uncle Arthur's cell phone when he was showing Mr. Caldwell." The girl's spontaneity broke the tension in the room. Christine smiled, extending her arms to Lily, who did not hesitate to approach for a hug. "Did you know that I also have a collection of unicorns?" Christine commented, noticing Lily's pajamas. "Arthur thinks it's silly, but they make me smile on difficult days." Me too," Lily exclaimed excitedly. "Do you want to see mine? I got several from Brittany, my friend from the new school." While Lily took Christine to see her collection, the three adults remained in the room, a silence charged with unspoken emotions hanging between them. "The doctors in Switzerland," Arthur began, his voice hoarse. "They said there was nothing more to do, that it was better to keep her sedated, comfortable until—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "That's why you didn't want the foundation," Ted understood. "You were afraid of giving Christine hope, and then I came here," Christine interrupted, returning to the room with Lily. "Against his will, mind you. But you know what happened? For the first time in years, I felt alive again. Not because of the medications or treatments, but because I was close to people who understand, who are not afraid to talk about the disease, who don't treat me like a condemned person." June felt tears in her eyes, recognizing in Christine's words her own feelings. "It's like we can finally breathe, isn't it? Without pretending that everything is okay, without hiding our pain." "Exactly," Christine smiled, taking Arthur's hand. "That's why we came. Not only to meet you, but to be part of this, of the foundation of the family." "Of the family?" Lily asked, her eyes shining. "Does that mean you and Uncle Arthur will also live here in New York City?" Arthur cleared his throat, visibly moved. "Actually, honey, that's why we came to talk. There's an apartment available in this same building, 2 floors down." Lily's joy was contagious. Soon she was making plans, talking about daily visits, about how she could help Aunt Christine with the unicorns, about how they could do physical therapy sessions together. Later, after Arthur and Christine said goodbye with the promise to return, the next day, to finalize the details of the move, Ted found June on the balcony, watching the city lights. "Amazing how a child can change everything, isn't it?" she commented, feeling Ted hug her from behind. "Lily. She doesn't see differences. She doesn't hold grudges. For her, family is who we choose to love." "She takes after her mother," Ted replied softly. "The same ability to see the best in people, to forgive. And after her father," June completed, turning to face him, "the same determination to do the right thing, even when it's difficult." Ted felt his heart skip a beat. It was the first time June had referred to him as Lily's father. "Are you still unsure about the wedding?" he asked gently. June smiled, looking at the simple ring on her finger. "No, I don't think I was ever really unsure. I was just scared. Scared that it was too good to be true." From Lily's room, they heard her voice humming a song she had learned at the new school. Something about family and love. The sound mixed with the noise of the city, creating a unique melody that seemed to cradle the moment. "Tomorrow I start the second phase of treatment," June commented, her voice stronger. "Dr. Evans said it's going to be more intense, but now I know I'm not alone, that I don't have to be strong all the time." At this moment, Lily appeared on the balcony carrying her drawing notebook. "Look what I did. It's our whole family. You, Mom, me, Uncle Arthur, Aunt Christine. And look, I drew unicorns flying around." Ted and June exchanged glances, smiling. In the childish drawing, everyone was holding hands, smiles on their faces, and above them, colorful unicorns danced in the New York City sky. It was an impossible, magical image, and yet somehow perfectly real in its simplicity and love. 3 weeks after the start of the second phase of treatment, the routine in the new New York City life had been established. The mornings started early, with Ted taking Lily to school while June prepared for another physical therapy session. The afternoons were dedicated to organizing the foundation, with virtual meetings and planning that now had the active participation of Arthur and Christine. On that specific Wednesday, something different happened during June's physical therapy session. After weeks of strenuous exercises and moments of discouragement, she managed to take 10 consecutive steps without support. The first person she wanted to tell wasn't Ted, not even Lily. It was Christine, who was doing her own session at the same time. "You did it!" Christine exclaimed, her eyes shining with genuine joy. "I knew you could do it. See, the new protocol is working." The two women, who initially approached each other for similar circumstances, had developed a deep friendship in recent weeks. They shared not only the pains and challenges of the disease, but also the small victories and, above all, the experience of rediscovering love in the midst of suffering. "I still can't believe I did it," June confessed, sitting in the chair, next to Christine while resting after the sessions. "For so long I thought I would never—" "I know," Christine completed, perfectly understanding what her friend wanted to say. "When the doctors in Switzerland said that I was only going to get worse, that there was no hope, it was as if they had stolen my future. But now we have hope." June smiled, taking her friend's hand. The moment was interrupted by the agitated arrival of Lily, who came running into the physical therapy room, followed by Ted and Arthur. Mom, guess what? I won the school's essay contest," she exclaimed, brandishing a colorful paper. "The theme was My Family, and I wrote about how we are different from other families, but are more special because of that." June took the paper, feeling tears forming in her eyes as she read. Lily's essay, written with the unique sincerity of children, spoke about how her family was like a puzzle, where the pieces didn't seem to fit together at first, but when put together they formed a more beautiful image than the one on the box. "She got that from you," Ted commented softly, placing his hand on June's shoulder. "That ability to see beauty where others only see defects." "Actually," Arthur interjected, surprising everyone with the emotion in his voice, "I think she taught that to all of us. Lily, come here for a moment. Uncle Arthur and Aunt Christine have a surprise for you." Christine took a folder from her lap and handed it to Lily. Inside were drawings of plants and colorful projects. "What is this?" the girl asked, curious. "These are the projects for the children's area of the foundation," Christine explained. "We want it to be a special place where children who have sick parents can feel at home, play, study, and we wanted your opinion on the design." "My opinion?" Lily widened her eyes. "Yes," Arthur continued, a genuine smile lighting up his normally serious face. "After all, you are our expert in making people feel at home, aren't you?" While Lily pored over the projects with Christine and Arthur, excitedly pointing out where they could put more colors and spaces to play, Ted pulled June to a quieter corner of the room. "I have two news," he said, his face a mixture of emotions. "The first is that the board unanimously approved the expanded budget for the foundation. We will be able to serve 3 times more families than we initially planned." "And the second?" June asked, noting a shadow of worry in his eyes. Mrs. Davis called. "It seems that the old recycling depot is going to be sold to a large development. The families that work there, they're going to be out of a place to work." June felt her heart clench. That place, despite all the difficulties, had been her home, her source of livelihood when no one else believed in her. "I've already thought of something," Ted continued quickly, seeing the worry on her face. "How about we turn the depot into the first branch of the foundation? We could create a model recycling center with decent working conditions, daycare for the children, medical care." "Ted," June interrupted, tears streaming down her face, "you don't have to do that. You've already done so much for us." "I'm not doing it for you," he replied softly. "I'm doing it because I finally understood what Cecilia tried to teach me all those years ago, that our true inheritance is not the money we accumulate, but the lives we transform." At this moment they were surprised by an exclamation from Lily. "Look, Aunt Christine, we can make a whole wall just with unicorn drawings. And here, a special corner for children to do homework like I did at the depot." Arthur, who was watching the scene, approached his brother and June. "You know what Christine told me yesterday? That for the first time in years, she's not just surviving, she's living. And I owe it to you, to this crazy family we created." "Speaking of family," Ted commented, "have you decided if you're going to accept being my best man?" Arthur swallowed, hard, clearly moved. "Only if Christine can be June's maid of honor." "Actually," June interjected, "we had already thought of that. And there's more. We want the ceremony to be in the garden of the mansion in Harmony Creek." "In the same garden where it all began," Ted completed. "Where you worked, where Cecilia made her mistakes, where our story began without us knowing. We want to transform that place of painful memories into a new beginning." "And then," Lily shouted from her design table, obviously having overheard the conversation, "we're going to have a party with unicorns and lots of colors, and everyone from the depot will be invited and it will be perfect," Christine completed, smiling, "because it will be our way, the way of our family." That night, after everyone had left and Lily was sleeping hugging her new projects for the foundation, Ted found June on the balcony, practicing her steps without support. "You know," she said, concentrated on maintaining her balance, "when you asked me to marry you, I was so scared. Scared of not being enough, of not getting better, of being a burden." "And now?" he asked, ready to support her if needed. "Now I understand that I don't need to be perfect, that I can have good and bad days, that I can need help sometimes, because I'm not alone anymore. I have a family, a real family." Ted hugged her from behind, both watching the lights of New York City. In the apartment below, they could hear Christine's laughter. Probably Arthur had said something about the unicorns again. In Lily's room, the star-shaped lamp projected dancing shadows on the ceiling. "Tomorrow we start the construction at the depot," Ted commented. "Mrs. Davis has already agreed to be the project coordinator." "And then?" June asked, turning in. His arms. Then we continue writing our story, one step at a time." On the other side of town, at the old recycling depot, a new sign already announced, "Future Family Support and Recycling Center, an initiative of the Cecilia Caldwell Foundation." And below, in smaller but no less important letters, "Because every family deserves a second chance." The month of October arrived, bringing a series of significant changes. The recycling depot renovation project was in full swing, with Mrs. Davis coordinating the work with an efficiency that surprised even Arthur. The families that previously worked in precarious conditions now received professional training and appropriate equipment, transforming the old place into a true example of a social enterprise. On an especially busy morning, June was in the Foundation's temporary office, installed on one of the floors of the building where Ted's apartment, although never used by him, was spacious and welcoming, located in an elegant building overlooking Central Park. Lily, impressed with the view from the 20th floor, spent hours drawing the different shades of the New York City sky. June, who now managed to walk for longer periods using just a cane, settled into her ergonomic chair when she received an unexpected visitor. It was Regina, the journalist and Brittany's mother, carrying a thick folder and wearing a worried expression. "Sorry to come without warning," she began, sitting down in the chair across from June's desk, "but I've discovered something you need to know before it becomes public." "What is it?" Regina answered, pulling some papers from the folder. "Robert, he's resurfaced, and he's giving interviews." The name of the ex-fiancé who had abandoned her while she was pregnant sent a shiver down June's spine. "What kind of interviews?" "The sensationalist kind. He's claiming he was threatened and bribed not only by Cecilia, but also by Ted. He says he has proof that you two were having an affair at the time and that Lily—" "No!" June interrupted, her voice trembling with indignation. "How dare! Ted wasn't even in town back then, and I never—" "I know," Regina reassured her. "That's why I came straight to you. As a journalist, I can tell you his story is full of holes, but the tabloid media won't care about that. They'll want the scandal, especially now that the foundation is gaining national attention." At that moment, Christine entered the room, pushing her wheelchair with more strength than before. The treatment was also showing positive results in her case. "I overheard," she said, closing the door behind her, "and I think I have something that can help." June and Regina looked at her curiously, as Christine pulled a small flash drive from her purse. "When Arthur told me about the past, about how you were unfairly accused, I began to do my own investigation. Old habits from when I was a district attorney before the illness." She smiled softly. "I found bank records from that time. Robert didn't just receive money from Cecilia, he was being paid by several competing supermarket chains." "What does that mean?" June asked, confused. "It means he was an inside man," Regina finished, starting to understand. "Someone strategically placed to create problems for the Caldwell family." "Exactly," Christine confirmed. "And now that the foundation is growing, that we're about to launch a revolutionary project of social inclusion through recycling, he reappears with these accusations?" The sound of hurried footsteps in the hallway interrupted the conversation. It was Lily running into the room, followed by Ted and Arthur. "Mom! Mom! Look what we found in the attic of the mansion!" the girl exclaimed, carrying an old box. June felt her heart skip a beat as she recognized the box. It was where Cecilia kept her jewelry, the same jewelry that had supposedly been stolen 20 years ago. "It was hidden behind a false wall," Ted explained, his voice choked. "Along with this." He extended an old diary, its pages yellowed with age. It was Cecilia's diary. "She wrote about everything," Arthur continued, his voice soft. "About how she began to feel the first symptoms of the disease, how she got confused, how she put the jewelry in a safe place and then forgot. And about you, June, about how she regretted believing lies, of letting fear and illness cloud her judgment." Lily, who had approached June, hugged her mother tightly. "There were photos too, Mom, of you working in the garden, taking care of the flowers. Mrs. Caldwell wrote that you were the only one who knew how to make the blue roses grow." "Blue roses?" Christine asked, interested. "It was a special project of Cecilia's," Ted explained. "She tried to create natural blue roses, without dyes. June was the only gardener who managed to understand the process." "And I still know," June whispered, tears streaming down her face. "It was a delicate process which required a lot of patience and care with the pH of the soil." Regina, who had remained silent observing the scene, suddenly had an idea. "What if we use that, not to attack Robert or deny his accusations, but to tell the real story?" "How so?" Arthur asked. "A series of special reports," Regina explained, her eyes shining with the possibility. "Not about scandals or accusations, but about new beginnings, about how a blue rose can grow even in the most unlikely soil, about how a family can rebuild itself through forgiveness and love, and about how sometimes we need to lose everything to find what really matters," added a voice from the door. It was Mrs. Davis, who had arrived for the daily meeting about the depot project. "The roses!" Lily exclaimed suddenly, jumping with excitement. "We can plant blue roses in the foundation's garden, and on the day of the inauguration, each family that is served can take a seedling home." The symbolism of the idea struck everyone present. Ted was the first to speak. "And we'll call it Blue Roses Project, a foundation program focused on families who, like Cecilia's roses, just need the chance and the right care to flourish." June, looking around the room, saw in each face a reflection of the miracle that her life had become. Mrs. Davis, who never gave up on her in the most difficult moments, Regina, using her work to tell stories that really mattered. Christine, who found in illness not an end, but a new purpose. Arthur, learning to open his heart through love for his wife. Ted, who needed to get lost to find himself. And Lily, her little blue rose, who had the gift of making love bloom where there had only been thorns. "You know what else Mrs. Caldwell wrote in the diary?" Lily asked, carefully leafing through the yellowed pages. "She said that blue roses were special because they were improbable, that everyone said it was impossible to make them grow naturally. But you never gave up, Mum, like us now. Everyone said it was impossible for you to get better, that it was impossible for us to be a family. But look." At that moment, looking at her daughter, who was now reading aloud excerpts from Cecilia's diary, June understood that sometimes the greatest miracles happen not when everything goes right, but when we learn to flourish, even when everything seems to go wrong. Outside the building, in the small experimental garden they had started for the foundation project, the first buds of the blue roses began to sprout, proving that, with enough love and care, even the impossible can bloom. The week that followed the discovery of Cecilia's diary was intense. While Regina prepared the series of special reports focusing on the family's story of overcoming and renewal, Robert's first interview on a tabloid show aired. As predicted, his accusations were heavy and directed not only at Ted and June, but now also at Cecilia's memory. Back at the apartment, Lily was at school when the interview was broadcast. June watched it alongside Ted, their hands intertwined, while Robert, visibly older and more disheveled, distilled his poison. "They planned everything," he claimed, gesturing nervously. "Ted and June were having an affair while she worked at the mansion. Cecilia found out, and to silence her, they invented the story of the robbery. I was threatened. I was offered money to disappear." "It's all lies," June whispered, tears of indignation streaming down her face. "You weren't even in town back then, and I—" "Shh," Ted calmed her gently. "We're not going to let him get to us. We have the evidence, Cecilia's diary, the bank records that Christine found." At this moment, Arthur and Christine entered the apartment, followed by Regina, who was carrying a thick folder. "Did you see it?" Arthur asked, his expression a mixture of anger and worry. "We saw it," Ted replied, turning off the television. "But Regina, you said you had something important to show us." The journalist nodded, spreading several documents on the coffee table. "I spent the night investigating, and I found this." They were records of admission to a rehabilitation clinic. The patient's name, Robert Silver. The dates, exactly from the period in which he had disappeared after receiving money from Cecilia. "He didn't disappear because of the money or threats," Regina explained. "He was admitted for treatment of chemical dependency and more. I found records of other admissions over the years, always followed by periods in which he tried to extort money from wealthy families, inventing stories and scandals." "But why now?" Christine asked, adjusting herself in her wheelchair. "Why come back after so long?" "Because of this," Regina continued, showing recent newspaper clippings. "The Cecilia Caldwell Foundation is about to become the largest private social project in the country. The model recycling center is already being replicated in other cities. You're in the headlines for the right reasons, making a difference in the lives of hundreds of families. And he wants a piece of that," Arthur completed, understanding. "Or rather, he wants to destroy it." The sound of the door opening interrupted the conversation. It was Lily returning from school, accompanied by Margaret. The girl was carrying a vase with a small blue rosebud. "Look, Mom, the first rose from our experimental garden is almost open," she exclaimed excitedly, placing the vase carefully on the table. "The teacher let me take it to show in science class. Everyone was impressed when I explained how you managed to make them grow blue naturally." June felt her heart warm with pride in her daughter's voice. Suddenly an idea began to form in her mind. "Regina," she called, her voice firmer than in recent days, "what if, instead of just defending ourselves against his accusations, we did something different?" "What do you have in mind?" the journalist asked, interested. "Robert is sick," June continued, "not just from the chemical dependency, but from the bitterness, from the resentment. What if we offered him help? What if we showed him that the foundation exists precisely for this, to give second chances, to help people start over?" A reflective silence fell over the room. It was Christine who broke it. "Like the blue roses," she said softly, "even the most difficult soil can produce something extraordinary with the right care." "But he's trying to destroy you," Arthur protested. "After everything he's done, after the lies he's telling, and that's exactly why we need to do this," Teddy interjected, understanding June's vision. "We cannot preach transformation and renewal if we are not willing to offer it to everyone, even to those who have hurt us." Lily, who had listened to the conversation in silence, approached the vase with the blue rose. "You know what Mrs. Caldwell wrote in the diary about the roses, that they only turned blue when they received exactly the right amount of nutrients, not more, not less. Like love, right? We need to give it in just the right measure." Regina picked up her notebook, already starting to type. "I can see the angle of the story forming, from blue roses to redemption. How a family transformed bitterness into mission. We're going to tell the complete story, the unjust accusation, the years of separation, the improbable reunion, and now the decision to transform even the attempts at destruction into opportunities for healing." "But how are we going to reach him?" Christine asked. "Robert is clearly being manipulated by someone. These accusations, the timing of the interviews—" "Leave it to me," Mrs. Davis, who had arrived silently during the conversation, spoke up. "I still have contacts from the depot days. I know where to find him." The following days were of intense activity. While Regina prepared the series of reports, Mrs. Davis managed to locate Robert in a simple boarding house on the outskirts of the city. As they suspected, he was again struggling with a chemical dependency, manipulated by people who wanted to use his story to target the Caldwell family. The first report in the series was published on a Monday. It didn't mention Robert's accusations directly, but told the story of Cecilia's blue roses, of June's dedicated work in the garden, and of how those improbable flowers had become a symbol of transformation and hope. On Tuesday, when the second report was about to be published, Robert appeared at the foundation's door. He was trembling, visibly ill, but his eyes carried something different, a mixture of shame and hope. "I read the article," he said to June, who received him in her office with Ted by her side, "about the roses. I remember when you took care of them, how you said that one day you would have your own garden." "And today I do," June replied softly. "Not only a rose garden, but a family, a purpose. And you, Robert, what do you have?" The question, asked without accusation or rancor, seemed to touch something deep in him. His legs buckled, and he fell to his knees, sobbing. "Forgive me," he pleaded. "I was so lost, so full of anger. When those men approached me, offering money to tell lies about you, I—" "What men?" Ted asked, but June gestured for him to wait. "We didn't come here carrying grudges to now create others," she said. "Robert, you are sick. You need help. And that's exactly what this foundation exists for." At this moment, Lily entered the room, carrying the vase with the blue rose that was now fully open, its petals of a deep and impossible blue shining under the sunlight that entered through the window. "Look, Mom, it opened. And you know what?" the teacher said. "That sometimes the most beautiful things come from the most unlikely places, like our family, right?" Robert looked at the girl, then at the rose. and finally at June and Ted. In his eyes, decades of bitterness began to dissolve, like ice exposed to the first sun of spring. "I want help," he whispered. "Please." Dee. That night, after Robert was referred to a rehabilitation clinic partnered with the foundation, June found Ted on the balcony of the apartment, watching the city lights. "You know what else Cecilia wrote in the diary?" she asked softly. "That blue roses were like little miracles, not because they were impossible, but because they required something rarer than skill or knowledge." "What?" Ted asked, hugging her from behind. "Unconditional love," June replied. "The kind of love that doesn't give up, that doesn't judge, that offers second chances. The kind of love you taught me when you found me again after 20 years. In the Foundation's experimental garden, dozens of blue rosebuds were beginning to sprout, silent promises that sometimes the most beautiful new beginnings are born in the most improbable soils." The grand opening of the family support and recycling center was scheduled for a week from then, coinciding with the end of June's intensive treatment in Rochester, Minnesota. The old recycling depot had been completely transformed. It now boasted modern facilities, a community area, daycare, an infirmary, and most special, a huge garden where dozens of blue roses bloomed under the attentive care of Mrs. Davis. On the morning of June's last consultation with Dr. Evans, the nervousness in the apartment was palpable. Lily insisted on wearing her best dress to accompany her mother, saying that special days deserve special clothes. Ted tried to disguise his anxiety by organizing and reorganizing papers he needed to take to the foundation meeting later. "Ready?" he asked June, who was finishing getting ready in the bedroom. To everyone's surprise, she came out walking, without support, using only a decorative cane that Lily had decorated with colorful ribbons. Her steps were firm, sure, though still cautious. "More than ready," she replied with a confident smile. "Whatever the result, we've already won." In the office, Dr. Evans performed a series of examinations and tests. Each movement, each reflex was carefully evaluated and recorded. Lily watched everything attentively, holding Ted's hand tightly. "Well," the doctor began, looking at the results on his computer. "I have to admit that in all my years of practice, I've never seen such an extraordinary response to treatment." "Does that mean," June began, her voice trembling slightly. "It means the disease is stabilized," he smiled. "We can't talk about a cure. Multiple sclerosis doesn't have a cure yet. But we've managed to reverse much of the damage, and with the maintenance of treatment and exercises, you can have a practically normal life." Lily was the first to react, jumping for joy and hugging her mother. Ted remained silent, tears streaming down his face. "There's one more thing," Dr. Evans continued, taking an envelope from his drawer. "The university is very interested in your case, June. The combination of the new protocol with your unique history, we'd like to invite you to be part of a longitudinal study. Your experiences can help other people with the disease." As they left the office, they found Arthur and Christine waiting in the hallway. Christine, who could now take a few steps, with the aid of a walker, was the first to notice the expressions on their faces. "Everything went well, didn't it?" she asked, her eyes shining. Before they could answer, they were surprised by the arrival of Regina, who was accompanied by a figure no one expected to see. Robert, now 2 weeks into treatment at the rehabilitation clinic. "Sorry to show up like this," Regina began, "but Robert had something important to tell, and I thought you needed to know before the center's opening." Robert, visibly healthier than at their last meeting, took a step forward. "I found out who was behind the accusations against you. They were executives from a competing supermarket chain. They have plans to build a shopping mall exactly where you're opening the recycling center." That's why they tried to destabilize us, Arthur concluded, his business mind quickly connecting the dots. They wanted to create such a big scandal that it would force us to sell the land. But they didn't count on one thing, Lily interjected, her voice carrying wisdom beyond her years. They didn't know that our family is like Mom's blue roses. The harder it gets, the stronger we grow. Her observation brought smiles to everyone's faces, even to Robert, who still carried the weight of guilt for his past actions. I have an idea, Ted said suddenly. Robert, you were an accountant before everything, weren't you? Yes, he replied, surprised. Why? The center is going to need someone to manage the finances, someone who understands both numbers and the reality of the people we're going to help. Someone who knew the bottom and found strength to start over. The impact of the offer was visible on Robert's face. After everything I've done, you would trust me? The foundation is about second chances, June replied softly. About believing that people can change, that the past doesn't have to define the future. At this moment, Margaret appeared running down the hallway. Mrs. June! Mrs. June! You need to see this! Everyone followed the housekeeper to the hospital's lobby, where a small crowd was gathering. They were families, dozens of them, all carrying blue roses. They are the families from the depot, Mrs. Davis explained, emerging from the crowd. When they heard it was your last day of treatment, they wanted to surprise you. Each of these roses was cultivated by them, following your techniques. June felt the tears running down her face as she walked, without a cane, among the people. Each familiar face, each smile, each hug told a story of transformation. See, Lily whispered, holding her hand. You taught them to make the roses. Grow, just like you taught Mr. Caldwell to make love grow in his heart again. The girl's innocent observation touched Ted deeply. Pulling June close, he made an impromptu announcement. The wedding that was planned for next month. How about we bring it forward to the day of the center's opening? We can turn everything into a big celebration of new beginnings. The suggestion was met with applause and cheers. Christine immediately began to make plans, her energy renewed with the idea of helping with the preparations. And you know what else? Arthur added, surprising everyone. Christine and I have decided to renew our vows on the same day to celebrate our own new beginning. As everyone talked excitedly about the preparations, Lily pulled Robert to a corner. You're going to be at the party too, right? Mom always says that family is who we choose to love, even when it's difficult. Robert knelt down to the girl's height, holding the blue rose that one of the families had given him. You know, Lily, I spent a lot of time angry, thinking that life had been unfair to me. But now I understand that sometimes we need to lose everything to find something much bigger. In the hospital's garden, where some of the blue roses had been planted as part of a therapeutic project, a particularly resistant bud finally opened. Its petals, of a deep and vibrant blue, seemed to dance under the sunlight, as if celebrating along with that improbable family that had learned that love, like blue roses, can bloom in the most unexpected places. The day of the opening of the Family Support and Recycling Center dawned with an extraordinarily blue sky, as if nature itself wanted to match the hundreds of roses that decorated the place. The old depot was unrecognizable. The entrance, once a rusty gate, now displayed a majestic arch covered in climbing blue roses. The land had been completely transformed into a welcoming space with green areas, a playground for the children and modern facilities for recycling work. June woke up before sunrise, her hands trembling slightly. Not from the disease, which was now under control, but from the emotion of the moment. Beside her, on the bedroom dresser, was the wedding dress that Christine had helped her choose. A simple but elegant model in a soft shade of light blue. "Mom?" Lily called softly, entering the room still in her pajamas. "Can I help you get ready?" The question, asked with such maturity by that girl who had changed so many lives, made June smile through tears. "Of course, honey, come here." While helping her mother with the dress, Lily spoke non-stop about the party preparations. "Mrs. Davis said that all the families from the old depot have already arrived. And you know what else? Robert organized a special surprise, but he wouldn't tell me what it is." Robert, who in recent weeks had dedicated himself intensely to his treatment and the work at the foundation, had become a constant and positive presence in everyone's life. His experience with accounting, combined with his own journey of recovery, made him especially qualified to help other people in vulnerable situations. On the other side of the building, in Arthur and Christine's apartment, another transformation was happening. Christine, who now walked with much more firmness thanks to the experimental treatment, was being helped by Regina to prepare for the renewal of vows. "I never thought I'd see this day," Christine confessed, while Regina adjusted her dress. "When the doctors in Switzerland said that I was only going to get worse." "But you not only got better," Regina completed, smiling, "you flourished like June's blue roses." In the building's lobby, Ted waited nervously, adjusting his blue tie for the 10th time. Arthur approached, carrying a small old box. "I found this yesterday, organizing some things in the mansion," he said, handing the box to his brother. "I think Cecilia would want June to use it today." Inside the box was a delicate pearl necklace, the same one that Cecilia had accused June of stealing so many years ago. Along with it, a note yellowed by time, "For when we find the right person to continue our love story for the blue roses." "She knew," Ted whispered, touched. "Even in moments of confusion, somewhere inside her, she knew." The ceremony was scheduled for the late afternoon, when the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The center's garden was packed. Families from the old depot, employees of Caldwell supermarkets, medical staff from the hospital, journalists, and dozens of people who had been touched in some way by the story of that improbable family. Mrs. Davis, elegant in her new dress, coordinated the last details with impressive efficiency. Each guest received, upon entering, a blue rose seedling in a small pot decorated by Lily and other children in the community. The surprise, organized by Robert, proved to be moving. He had gathered video testimonials from all the families that would benefit from the center, telling their stories of overcoming and hope. The screens set up at the entrance displayed these testimonials in a continuous loop, reminding everyone of the true meaning of that celebration. When the music began, a soft version of "What a Wonderful World" played by a string quartet, all eyes turned to the garden entrance. Lily came first, scattering petals of blue roses along the path, her flower girl dress matching her mother's. Then June appeared, walking alone and firmly, without a cane or any support. On her neck, Cecilia's pearl necklace shone softly. Her eyes met Ted's, who was waiting for her under an arch of blue roses. And at that moment, all the pains of the past seemed to dissolve in the fragrant air of the garden. "We are here today," began the officiant, "not only to unite two people in marriage, or to renew the vows of love of another two, but to celebrate the transformative power of true love. A love that, like the blue roses that surround us, defies the odds and flourishes even in the most improbable soils." During the exchange of vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Ted spoke about how he needed to get lost to be found by a little girl with a giant heart. June spoke about second chances and miracles that happen when we least expect them. Arthur and Christine renewed their commitment to each other, stronger now after facing together the challenges of the disease. But it was Lily who stole the scene when, at the time of the rings, she asked to speak. "When I was little," she began, her voice clear and confident, "Mom always told me that family isn't just who has the same blood. It's who we choose to love. I didn't really understand what that meant until I found Mr. Caldwell in those woods. Now I know that sometimes we need to go through difficult things to find even more beautiful things. Ursen. And you know what else I learned? She continued, looking at everyone present. That love is like Mom's blue roses. Everyone says it's impossible to make them grow naturally, but with care, patience, and a lot of affection, they not only grow, but they become more beautiful than all the other roses. After the ceremony, during the party that extended into the night, Robert climbed onto the small stage set up in the garden. His appearance was completely different from the embittered man who had tried to destroy the family's happiness months ago. I want to officially announce, he said, his voice firm, that the center's rehabilitation and professional reintegration program already has its first complete class. 20 people who, like me, are getting a second chance. And each of them will receive training in basic accounting and financial management so they can not only work but build their own future. The applause was interrupted by a commotion near the main rosebed. One of the roses, different from all the others, was beginning to open its petals under the moonlight. Its petals weren't just blue, they were of a shade so deep and brilliant that they seemed almost luminescent. "It's a miracle," someone in the crowd exclaimed. "No," June corrected softly, approaching the rose with Ted by her side. "It's love. The kind of love that transforms, that heals, that gives new colors to old stories." Lily, who was watching the scene embraced by Christine and Arthur, smiled. "Like our family, right? Everyone said it was impossible, but look how beautiful it turned out." In the sky, the first star of the night shone especially brightly, as if Cecilia was giving her blessing to this new family that had been born from the seeds of forgiveness that she herself had planted in her garden so many years ago. And so, under a starry sky and surrounded by blue roses, that improbable family celebrated not only a wedding or an inauguration, but the certainty that love, when true, has the power to transform even the most unlikely stories into real fairy tales. Not the fairy tales in books where everything is perfect and magical, but those that happen in real life, where the magic lies precisely in the ability to find beauty even in the most difficult moments, to make hope flourish even in the most barren soils, to paint in blue a world that many insist on seeing only in black and white.